Welcome to our channel. We are sincerely trying to choose interesting stories, so we would really like to see your subscription.
What made May 17th so noteworthy? It wasn't a special occasion like my wife's birthday, our anniversary, or the day we first met. It was just an ordinary Tuesday, and that's precisely why I chose it. My name is Eric, and after 11 years, my marriage to Sandra was becoming a bit routine, or shall I say, predictable. It's not that I didn't love her, she and the kids were my top priorities. However, that spark that used to light up her eyes when the topic of intimacy came up seemed to be fading lately. As a hopeless romantic, I decided to create a memorable night for her. On Monday morning at work, I sought advice from Jenna, Claire, and Karen, three of the most attractive single women in the office. Ladies, if you could envision the most romantic night of your life, what would it be? I inquired. Around midnight, they enthusiastically shared ideas ranging from Paris and a gondola in Venice to watching the sunset from a hot tub over the Swiss Alps. I reined them in, explaining that I was thinking more along the lines of a romantic night at home or in a downtown hotel, something within a reasonable budget. By noon, they provided a list of ideas that fit my financial constraints. I expressed my gratitude, treated them to lunch, and began making plans. They were almost as excited as I was, jumping with anticipation and warning me not to fail, as they had a bet on how the evening would unfold. The first step was taking Wednesday afternoon off to ensure everything was in order before Sandra returned. Normally I got home around 6 o'clock, but Sandra was always there by 4:30 to welcome the kids home from the school bus. On Tuesday night, I informed Sandra that my parents wanted to treat the kids to dinner and a show on Wednesday, so they wouldn't be back until 8 o'clock that evening. The kids became even more thrilled when I revealed a surprise for their mom and that they would spend the night with their grandparents, who, true to form, were always eager to spoil them. I left my workplace on Wednesday at around 11:30, armed with my to-do list. The plan included some free time, taking the kids to mom's, a quick trip to the store, and then the execution of a thoughtful surprise for my wife. The girls provided me with a detailed list, down to the lighting and background music. The florist gave me a puzzled look when I asked for 2 pounds of rose petals, but her expression changed when I explained my romantic intentions. "You must really love your wife to go to all this trouble for her," she commented as I left with the red rose petals in hand. I finally made a reservation for 8 at Sandra's favorite steakhouse, anticipating the need for a meal by 8 p.m. If we decided to cancel dinner, I made sure we had steaks ready to grill on the patio. Everything started falling into place. I arrived home, hid the car, and brought all the items into the kitchen with a deadline of 2:30 to get everything ready. Over the next hour, I froze wine, created a heart on the bed with rose petals, and used chocolate to spell out "I love you" in the center. I filled the garden tub with water and sprinkled the remaining rose petals on top. On my side of the bed, I placed wine in an ice bucket and a card next to the reading lamp. Adjusting the lighting, I opened a bottle of wine, poured 2 glasses, and set up a portable CD player on the dresser. I planned to turn on the music after she entered the bedroom. The final touches involved a quick shower, shave, and getting ready by standing naked at the foot of the bed, holding 2 glasses of wine, eagerly awaiting her arrival. At exactly 3:25, I heard her car pull up, ready for the surprise. However, my anticipation turned into shock as Sandra entered the bedroom with her boss, Rick. The romantic atmosphere quickly dissipated, and my heart sank. The moment stretched into what felt like an eternity, 475 seconds. It was enough time to shatter the romantic mood and potentially damage our marriage. Sandra's initial reaction revealed her realization that something had changed, and the unfolding events signaled trouble. In just 475 seconds, the atmosphere shifted from excitement to a realization that our relationship was in jeopardy. If it wasn't a record for destroying a marriage, it was certainly close. Upon witnessing the unfolding events, Rick swiftly dashed towards the front door, disappearing within 45 seconds. Meanwhile, I observed as Sandra began to weep and collapse to her knees. I emptied the contents of both glasses onto the bed, proceeded to the closet, and commenced getting dressed. Throughout this, I listened to Sandra expressing her remorse and professing her love. It took about 5 minutes for me to dress, during which I conveyed to her that it would be in her best interest to leave before my return. Heading downstairs, I got into my car and drove to the nearest place where I could have a drink. Seated at Tony's, finishing my fourth mug of beer, I pondered my next steps. At 6:30, I returned to my now silent and empty home. The front door was unlocked, and Sandra's car was nowhere to be seen. After a brief moment downstairs, I proceeded to our bedroom. The scene remained mostly unchanged. The garden tub running, untouched wine, card, and chocolates, Sandra's closet ajar, and several dresser drawers open. Seated on the bed, I attempted to organize my thoughts when my cell phone rang. Opting to ignore it, I turned it off, as I wasn't inclined to talk to anyone at that moment. Recognizing the need to replace the mattress in the guest room, I mumbled to myself as I woke up the next morning. After showering and shaving, I headed to work, resembling more of a zombie on the way to my office. Upon entering, all three girls greeted me with screams, curious about the events of the previous night. Reluctantly, I shared a condensed version of the story. Katie blurted out a comment a bit too loudly, prompting Claire to inquire about my plans. I responded, determined to survive and take care of my kids, urging them to keep quiet about the situation within the office. Following their departure, I closed the office door and swiftly took care of financial matters. Bank accounts, credit cards, life insurance policies, and the 401k were all closed or modified by 9:30 a.m. I then called my parents, explaining that Sandra and I were facing difficulties and asking if they could look after the kids until the weekend. They were saddened but willing to help. Checking my cell phone, I found 20 messages from Sandra, all of which I discarded. Later, a lawyer provided the name of another lawyer at a reasonable cost, and I scheduled an appointment for Friday morning. Spending 2 hours with the divorce lawyer revealed the complexity of my situation. It was essentially my word against Sandra's, and she hadn't technically done anything wrong when caught with Rick. Frustratingly, she might end up with custody of the kids, the house, and a significant portion of my earnings after taxes. Feeling helpless, I considered the lawyer's suggestion of marriage counseling or a 90-day cooling off period. Leaving the office early, I moved my belongings into the spare bedroom, replaced the mattress, and ignored Sandra's calls. Anticipating her arrival, I made sure to be prepared. On Friday, I picked up the kids and took them to a pizza place, and they shared their excitement. Sandra eventually arrived around 8:30 that evening, surrounded by the kids. However, she never took her eyes off me. By 10 o'clock, the kids dispersed to their rooms, and I retreated to the guest room. Sandra requested a conversation, but I declined, stating that I wasn't in the mood. Locked in the guest room, I heard a muffled scream as Sandra surveyed our former bedroom. The next morning, I noticed discarded items: a card, rose petals, chocolates, and an empty wine bottle. While the kids went about their Saturday activities, I made coffee. Uninterested in breakfast, Sandra appeared as I finished my first cup. I poured another drink, grabbed the newspaper, and headed out to the deck. "You know you're going to have to talk to me sooner or later," she said, her eyes red. "But why, Sandra? What can you tell me to explain what I saw on Wednesday? How long have you been cheating on me with Rick?" "It was only the second time, believe me, honey," Sandra sobbed. "Why, I have a hard time believing you, and by the way, You've lost the privilege of calling me sweetheart or anything else that sounds affectionate, I spat out. We're going to coexist for the sake of the kids until I realize what's best for me and for them. It sounds like you've already made your choice. Just then, Sandra ran into the house and I finished my coffee, tearing up the paper in a rage. Work sucked for the next 2 weeks, but at least it wasn't as bad as my home life. Someone had blabbed at work, and now all I got were these pitying looks from all the women in my office every time I walked past them. My boss wanted to know if I needed my own personal free time, but I told him I was doing fine and that I needed a job to stay sane. The kids realized from day one that something was up and asked if they had done anything wrong. Kids, your mom and I are going through a rough patch, but it's okay. Trust me, I told them, but it wasn't. Sandra tried to talk to me and even tried to seduce me once, but I didn't feel anything for her anymore. I felt worse than whale shit when Claire walked into my office on Thursday just before 5 o'clock. Grab your coat. We're leaving, she announced. I looked up to say something, but she stopped me. Maybe you don't understand. This is not a request. Grab your damn coat. We're out of here. When Claire and I arrived, there were two more of the formidable trio, Jenna and Stephanie, sitting at a table in the corner at a noni. After ordering a drink, Claire started on me. You need to come to your senses, Eric, she began. You've been walking around like a dead man for the last 2 weeks, and even though everyone has your back, you're going to be in deep shit if you don't get your head and ass tied up. I have my reasons, so why don't you just fuck off? I almost shouted back at her. Fuck off, asshole. You're not talking to Sandra, Stephanie replied. What the hell do you want, Eric, or are you going to wallow in self-pity for the rest of your life? I want things to be the way they were before this shit happened, I said, looking down at my glass. I thought you said your marriage was outdated and you wanted to revitalize it, Katie asked. Do you really want to go back to your boring life? Do you love her? I love and hate her at the same time. I'd like to strangle her and Rick for what they did to me, I shouted. I just don't know what the hell to do or even where to start. Let's eat and then we'll figure it out, Claire said, beckoning the waiter over. The first thing we need to do is level the playing field. Sandra is still at your house and goes back to work every day. Rick, on the other hand, is coming home to his loving wife and kids, even though he ruined your marriage, Claire spat out. It's time for you to get your life back by the end of the evening. I started feeling better, and they were correct. I needed to take action. I couldn't allow this situation to persist any longer as it was tearing me apart. When I arrived home, Sandra inquired about my whereabouts. What do you care? I shouted, and she went to her bedroom in tears. The following day, I met with my lawyer, Randy, who asked if I had reconsidered waiting for the divorce. I affirmed my decision, but expressed my intention to sue the company where Rick and Sandra worked. I also planned to file a love alienation lawsuit against Rick. I explained to Randy that even though I lacked concrete evidence, the fact that they worked for a publicly traded company could work in my favor. Given recent news about corporate mismanagement, I believed they wouldn't want negative publicity. Moreover, I pointed out that Sandra, despite being off a duty, worked until 5, a time when most managers are still on the job. Corporate bylaws often include a morals clause, especially concerning a married boss having a relationship with a married employee under their control during work hours. Randy cautioned that setting everything up and filing the paperwork would take a few days, but he assured me of timely updates. For the next 3 days, I maintained my usual demeanor. I interacted with colleagues, had fun with the kids, and even started talking to Sandra again, making things a bit easier for her. On Thursday, Randy informed me that their company had been served, but I requested him to delay Rick's paperwork until we settled matters with their company. By the following Tuesday, Randy and I were in a conference room with the CEO and manager. They pointed out a lack of documentation for the alleged incident, and the manager mentioned frivolous lawsuits. Surprisingly, I stood up, heading for the exit, stating, "I guess I'll see you in court." I calmly informed them that we would be taking statements from everyone in the office, and finding one or two who knew about the situation would suffice. I questioned how many managers would defend Rick when their positions were at risk. As I walked out with Randy, I maintained my composure. On Wednesday, while at my desk, Randy called saying they wanted to settle. I had requested $250,000 in attorney's fees and both Rick and Sandra to be transferred to other state offices. The offer was valid until noon Thursday. Later that afternoon, Randy informed me they agreed to the fees and transfers but offered $500,000. I instructed him to relay that the current price was $300,000 and any counteroffer would escalate to $400,000. Thursday at 3:30, Randy confirmed that my offer had been accepted. By 5 o'clock, I had the forms for my signature, and I promptly left the office after informing the receptionist. I quickly contacted Randy to handle Rick's service tonight, arranging it at Rick's place. Tomorrow, I'd have closure and could move forward in my life. Gathering everyone for dinner, I announced, "Grab your coats. We're going out tonight." Sandra hesitated, but eventually joined in after my insistence. During dinner, we reminisced and laughed, restoring the joy we had shared over the past 12 years. Life seemed to be back on track. Upon returning home, everyone expressed gratitude for the great night. Sandra, with a wide smile, kissed me on the cheek, thanking me for the evening. "It meant a lot to me tonight," she said. I informed her we'd have a significant conversation tomorrow night and advised her to get some rest. The next evening, Sandra walked in yelling, "You son of a bitch," accusing me of knowing what would happen the previous night. I admitted I had an idea. She explained she was offered a job in Tennant, New Jersey, and when she refused, they swiftly terminated her, giving her 20 minutes to clear her desk after 8 years of service. Curious about Rick, I asked where he was being transferred, and she revealed Flint, Michigan. With a grin, I commented, "It wouldn't have happened to a nicer guy." I laid out conditions for Sandra to remain part of the family, getting tested for STDs, providing a health certificate, and undergoing a polygraph test. As she cried through the questions, I explained we had a counseling appointment on Saturday if she passed. Despite not fully trusting her, I decided to start anew without the lies. Although I wasn't thrilled with her answers, she managed to pass in my mind. We hadn't been intimate for 5 months, and that was the part I missed the most. We had occasional sex, but it didn't compare. Rick had moved to Flint, Michigan, and in a Christmas card, I humorously expressed relief that he wasn't around. Interestingly, his wife and kids were with us in the sunny South, a victory over the cheating husband. I am presently navigating through an extremely challenging and emotionally tumultuous situation, a circumstance I never expected to face. This unfolded against the backdrop of what seemed to be a successful and fulfilling life with a full-time job, a lucrative salary, and National Guard service. Physically fit and proud of building my own house on a small farm, the relationship aspect was equally significant, having spent 11 years with my partner and marrying 2 years ago, planning to start a family. However, during my combat deployment, the unimaginable happened. In my absence, my wife had an affair with the man hired to fix our fence. The pain intensified when I discovered they engaged in unprotected intimacy multiple times, and she developed strong feelings for him, sharing experiences and emotions she had never shared with me. Complicating matters is that my wife remains oblivious to the fact that I know the full extent of their infidelity. The question now is how to proceed and navigate the wreckage of trust and love, I find myself in an unprecedented situation, challenging to comprehend how everything unraveled. Despite being a responsible provider, my wife chose to have an affair with a younger, attractive cowboy who is already married with kids. Maintaining composure has been difficult, and I confided in friends for support. While my Catholic best friend advocates salvaging the relationship, I am leaning towards filing for divorce. The situation has intensified, and I've taken decisive measures, hiring a private investigator. The revelations were alarming, with the man having a questionable background. Last night marked a breaking point with a panic attack. I haven't confronted my wife yet, but preparations are underway. I have initiated the divorce process as it becomes increasingly clear that the relationship can not be salvaged. The situation escalated further, and I opted to reveal the truth on her birthday, handing her divorce papers. The shock was evident as I disclosed the affair, lies, and involvement with the other man. She collapsed, pleading for forgiveness, but reconciliation seemed impossible. I made her infidelity public, sending emails to family, friends, and colleagues with evidence. It was far from the birthday celebration she envisioned. Finally, I made her pack her belongings and leave. The aftermath involved blame shifting from her family, gaslighting, and attempts to manipulate me into staying. Despite suggestions for therapy, she signed the divorce papers and I filed them. She expressed a desire to salvage the marriage, but I had lost care for the situation. The divorce has been finalized, marking the end of a painful chapter. The aftermath brought significant changes to both our lives. I kept the house while she moved to Texas. She displayed no remorse throughout the process. Returning from deployment to a situation that led to divorce was challenging. Rediscovering vulnerability and relying on faith became my sources of strength. Understanding why people betray others remains a challenging question. Everything happens for a purpose, reshaping my perspective on life and relationships. Grateful for unwavering support, it's time for a new chapter with someone who genuinely desires to create stories alongside me. Stories